Okay? I'm going to just explain them. Well, then you have to copy them down from somebody else because I don't have them anymore either. Okay. So these are the notes. Listen. Here's where we're at. When I was absent at the meeting the other day, you took down some notes, and they should be at the very top. I believe it talks the theory of evolution by natural selection, and it gives you 1, 2, 3. Number 1, variation. Listen. In order for Darwin's theory of natural selection, the theory of evolution by natural selection to work, you absolutely need a population of organisms, no matter what it is, it doesn't matter, like maple trees, okay? You need some population of organisms, like maple trees, and you need to have variation in them. They can't all be the same. They may look the same, but they're not all the same. Deep in their DNA, there are differences, believe me, just like there's differences in our DNA. So every population needs variation, okay? So number 1, you need variation. And the reason, by the way, the reason variation comes about, you should have wrote, is caused by mutations in DNA. And those are random. Remember the chapter we covered where you had to take DNA and you had to replicate it? You basically ripped it apart like a zipper and you added new nucleotides. That process is not perfect. Mistakes are made. That's where the mutations come from. A lot of those times the mutations aren't bad and the organism still lives. Like maple trees, they have mutations, but they're not so bad where the maple tree's going to die. But it's going to be different from its maple tree to the left. That's good. So Darwin said variation. You need variation, and variation is a good thing. Step 2, organisms are going to produce more offspring than can survive. Well, if you guys have ever seen a maple tree with those little helicopters, you definitely know the fact that an organism is going to produce more organisms or more offspring than can survive. Okay, so think about those. And he says, as a result of those 2 things happening, the environment is going to play a role in which of those maple trees are going to have a better chance of reproducing. They're not all going to do it, but the ones that will are the ones that are going to be better adapted to their environment. Maybe the seeds on some of those maple trees are a little stronger. So they're going to withstand a really cold, like a cold snap out there. Well, those seeds that are thicker, they have an advantage. They're going to be able to produce a new offspring whose seeds are also going to be a little thicker. So that's basically what he's saying. He's saying, it's nature. It's the environment that's choosing who's better and who's worse, who's going to have better success. So number 3, variations that increase reproductive success will have a better chance of being passed to offspring. In other words, the best adapted to their environment will survive, just like the seeds of the maple trees were. If they're just slightly thicker, they have a better chance, they're better adapted, and they're going to survive. And that's one example, but that's it. That's his theory. It's really not complicated. You probably have heard it before, and it's actually simple. It's so simple that it's pretty easy to understand, and it makes sense. Okay, and then I just kind of showed. I think that was the last part of your notes. I did talk about this word descent with modification. It's just a fancy word that Darwin kind of said, if you believe my theory. What I just got done telling you, believe my theory. He says it makes sense only that organisms have become varied, just like the finches, okay? But they have all come from one ancestor. And that's why we kind of have this tree thing. You got to understand, before that, everybody kind of placed organisms on a ladder, like bacteria down here, humans up here, and everything in between. Darwin's like, no, it's not a ladder. It's like a tree. On the tips of the branches, you have all these variety and diversity of life. But they've all come from somebody before them. And that's why they said the tree of the trunk is like the common ancestor to it all. That's the controversial part. So Darwin's basically saying all living organisms, plant, animal, I don't care what you are, have all descended from one common ancestor back in time. So, and that's descent with modification refers to the fact that all organisms are kind of descent from a common ancestor, and they've been modified through time, over time, by this natural selection. So that's what I missed. So it was really kind of straightforward. Today's notes. Let's see if we can copy them down real quick. And you started to. So now I'm going in kind of a different area, the evidence for evolution. And like I said, some of this came before Darwin, some of this came after Darwin, some of this came while Darwin was around. But these are all the pieces of evidence to support his theory that you just learned about. The fossil records. I'm going to kind of talk for the sake of time while you're writing. The fossil record, number one. Without a doubt, it's the best piece of evidence out there to support the fact that organisms have changed over time. You see it. You see it in the layers. You see it in the layers. Ancient species similar to current species. I know that doesn't make any sense. Here's what that means. The fact that even those critters that existed long ago and have become extinct have similarities to organisms that are still living today. In other words, they're not all that different. There are lots of things that all living organisms, young and old, extinct and non-extinct, have in common. Yeah.
Can you slide that up?
Yep, I will. Transitional fossils.
Thank you.
Transitional fossils, and I give you an example of one, Archaeopteryx. This thing was cool. This thing existed in the time of the dinosaurs, and it was a dinosaur, but it had really bird-like features too. They actually believe modern-day birds have evolved from dinosaurs, and they use Archaeopteryx as a huge example to kind of prove that. The fact that you had these dinosaurs that had feathers, that had wings, that were very bird-like in a lot of ways, hollow bones like birds today have.
Can we call it an ostrich?
It kind of looked like one. It did. It really looked like an ostrich-looking thing. It did. It was weird. But great example of a transitional fossil. You can see how an organism changed. Comparative analogy. Okay. Homologous structures fall under this. I want you to understand what a homologous structure is. Similar structure may have different function. That's what that says. Similar structure may have a different function. For example, vertebrate forelimbs. Got to show you a quick picture. I have time. I know the bell doesn't ring for a while. I'm taking this away. Homologous structures. Try to envision this picture. Homologous structures. These are the forelimbs of three completely different vertebrates. One that walks, one that swims, one that flies. Totally different function. But they all have really a very similar bone plan to them. You got one bone on top, two bones. One bone, two bones. One bone, two bones. That radiate out into other bones that kind of broken up. In other words, they're all different, but they're all the same. This kind of unites all these creatures. This kind of says, well, you know what? They've all started out with the same basic plan, and over time and through different environments, that plan's been just modified a bit into different kind of functions for those wings, but with the same basic plan. That's what homologous structures are. So that's vertebrate forelimbs is what that means. Vertebrate forelimbs are what the picture I just showed you. Vestigial structures. Reduced form of a structure. I usually kind of call vestigial structures useless. Okay? In every plant and animal, you have these structures that are useless. You know, for us, it might be considered our appendix. There are some snakes out there that still have a pelvis and limb bones. They don't even have any limbs. Why would they have limb bones? They would have these little, off of their spine, they have these little tiny extensions. They're vestigial. They have no purpose on being on that snake, but they're the remnants of what they used to have. There are some fish in the depths of the ocean that are blind, but they still have eyes. In fact, their eyes are kind of half covered up with scales. So you know that evolution is taking place just to get rid of them.
Pardon interruption for one quick announcement. Those of you driving home tonight, the roads are fairly clear, but please, anytime you're on a wet road or a possible slicker road, add a little extra length to your stopping. So please drive careful going home. Thank you.
Don't go 50, try to continue.
All right, analogous structures. Same function, different structure. The wing of a bat and the wing of a bee. Okay, I'm going to get cut off by the bell, and that's okay. The wing of the bat and the wing of the bee. They both let that organism fly, but the wing of a bat has bones, has blood, has nerves. The wing of a bee is just a thin film of like skin. Okay, totally different structure. But this proves the fact that these organisms, totally different and in different environments, still evolve the same structure, a flying structure. It just creates unity with all the organisms out there. All right, guys, I'll end there.
Why did Justin start saying